Welcome to Divine Peace. Tonight, we'll read through the story of the prophet Elisha to help you slow down, settle your thoughts, and drift into peaceful sleep. There will be no ads while you listen. If this channel brings you rest, consider subscribing, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're listening from tonight. Now, settle in, close your eyes, and let's begin. There is a moment, near the end of a long life, when a man knows the day of his leaving has come. He does not run from it. He does not linger over it. He simply rises and begins to walk, and if you were watching from the hills of that ancient land, you would see two figures moving together across the morning, an old man and a younger one, and you would not know which of them was about to be carried away, and which of them was about to inherit the sky. This is the story of the one who was left behind. Not left behind in sorrow, though there was sorrow. Left behind in the sense that a torch is left behind when the hand that first lit it lets go. Elisha son of Shaphat, who had been ploughing a field with 12 yoke of oxen, when the great prophet Elijah came and threw a cloak across his shoulders and kept walking, as if to say, without a single word, "Follow me and become something you cannot yet imagine." He had left the oxen in the furrow. He had slaughtered them, burned the wooden yoke to cook the meat, given it to the people, and gone after the old man. And from that day he had served him, poured water on his hands, walked in his shadow, and waited for the hour that was now finally arriving. Tonight we walk that road with them. We walk it slowly, in the cool of a night that never quite ends, following a prophet whose power began at a riverbank, and, remarkably, did not stop even at his grave. For this is what makes the story of Elisha unlike any other. Long after the man himself had died and been laid in a tomb, his bones still carried enough of that borrowed fire to raise a dead man to his feet. The power outlived the body. It kept working after he was gone. But all of that is far ahead of us, at the end of the road, and we are only at the beginning. The beginning is at Gilgal. The land is quiet in the early light. Gilgal sits in the hill country, a place heavy with old memory, the kind of place where stones had been stacked generations before to mark where God had once done something no one dared forget. And here, on this particular morning, two men are preparing to leave. Elijah, the great prophet of fire and drought, and the long war against the false gods of the age, and Elisha, his servant, his shadow, his student. They know, both of them, what the day holds. The knowledge sits between them like a third presence, unspoken and heavy. The account tells us plainly that the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind. And so Elijah, knowing his time, turns to the younger man and speaks the first of 3 quiet dismissals. "Stay here," he says. "The Lord has sent me to Bethel." It sounds like a simple instruction. Stay here. Rest. Do not trouble yourself with the road ahead. But listen closely, because this is the heart of everything that follows. Elisha does not obey. "As surely as the Lord lives," he answers, "and as you live, I will not leave you." There it is. The vow that will be repeated word for word 3 times before the day is done. "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." It is not the language of a servant asking permission. It is the language of a man who has decided with everything in him that he will not be sent away. Whatever is coming, he intends to be present for it. Whatever falls, he intends to be standing close enough to catch it. So they go down to Bethel together, and at Bethel a strange thing happens, a thing that will happen again at the next stop, and it deepens the sense that everyone in the region already knows what is about to occur. The company of the prophets who live at Bethel come out to Elisha. These were groups of men set apart for the prophetic life, living in communities, learning, waiting, watching. They come out to Elisha, and they draw him aside, and they say to him, almost in a whisper, as though they are letting him in on a secret he might not have heard, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" And Elisha's answer is a study in restraint. "Yes, I know," he says. "So be quiet. Be quiet. Do not speak of it." It is not that he is unaware. He knows better than any of them. It is that he cannot bear to have the moment named aloud, cannot bear to hear the coming loss discussed like the weather, cannot bear anything that would make the day feel smaller than it is. He knows. He simply does not wish to hear the words a moment before he has to. Then Elijah turns to him a second time. "Stay here, Elisha," he says. "The Lord has sent me to Jericho." And the answer comes again, unchanged, worn smooth by repetition and made stronger by it. As surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, I will not leave you. So the two of them go on to Jericho. Consider the geography of this last journey, because it is not random. From the high country down toward the great valley of the Jordan, retracing in reverse the path by which Israel had first entered the land generations before. Down and down, toward the lowest place, toward the river that had once parted to let a whole nation cross on dry ground. It is as though the old prophet is walking his successor through the memory of the entire story, one final time before he leaves it in his hands. At Jericho the same scene repeats. The company of the prophets who lived at Jericho come to Elisha. They pull him aside. They say the same thing the others had said. Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today? And Elisha gives the same answer, the answer he has clearly grown tired of giving. Yes, I know. So be quiet. 50 of these men will follow at a distance to see what happens. 50 witnesses standing back watching the two figures move toward the water. They know something is coming. They do not know its shape. They only know that they must not miss it. And then, at Jericho, Elijah speaks the third and final time. Stay here, he says. The Lord has sent me to the Jordan. And for the third time, the vow. As surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, I will not leave you. So the two of them walk on together. Now they stand at the edge of the river. Picture it. The Jordan in that season, moving brown and steady between its banks, the reeds bending in the low breeze, the far shore hazy across the water. Behind them, at a distance, 50 men have stopped and are standing in a loose line watching. And here, at the water's edge, the old prophet reaches up and takes off his cloak. The word for that cloak in the old language is a heavy word. It describes a thick garment, a mantle of animal hair, a sheepskin thing, coarse and weighty and worn. This was not fine clothing. This was the rough dress of a man who lived in the wilderness, who had stood before kings with dust on his feet, who had called down fire and outrun chariots and hidden in caves. The cloak was the sign of his office. When people saw that cloak, they knew who wore it. It was the prophet made visible, and Elijah takes it off, and he rolls it up, and he strikes the water with it. There is something deliberate in that folding. The text lingers on it, the gathering of the cloth, the winding of it into something solid enough to strike with. It is a gesture, and it is meant to be a gesture, a thing done in full view of the man beside him and the 50 men behind. This is what the mantle does. This is the power it carries. Watch closely, because you will need to remember this. He strikes the water, and the water divides. It parts to the right and to the left, and the riverbed is laid bare, and the two men walk down onto ground that had been under the current a moment before, and they cross to the other side on dry land, the water standing up on either side of them like walls. The 50 men watch from the far bank. The old story is happening again, the story of the sea and the story of this same river, the story of God making a road where there had been no road. And now the two of them are alone on the eastern side, and there is not much time left, and Elijah knows it. Tell me, he says, turning to Elisha, what can I do for you before I am taken from you? It is an extraordinary question. What can I do for you? The whole life of service, the years of pouring water on the old man's hands and following in his dust, and now at the very end the old man turns and offers to give something back. What do you want? Ask it now, while I'm still here to ask. And Elisha does not hesitate. He does not ask for comfort or safety or an easier road. He asks for the one thing that matters. Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit, he says, a double portion. Those are careful words, and they carry a weight that the men of that time would have understood at once. A double portion was the inheritance of the firstborn son. When a father died and his estate was divided among his sons, the eldest received 2 shares where the others received 1. The double portion was the mark of the heir, the sign of the one who would carry on the father's name and house and legacy into the next generation. So when Elisha asks for a double portion of Elijah's spirit, he's not asking to be twice as powerful exactly, though that is how the request rings in the ear. He is asking to be treated as the firstborn son of the prophet. He is asking to be the heir. He is saying, in the language of family and inheritance, let me be the one who carries this forward. Let the office pass to me. Let me be, when you are gone, what you were. And Elijah does not simply grant it. He cannot. This is the crucial thing to understand about the whole story we are about to travel. The power was never Elijah's to give away like a coin. It belonged to God. Elijah could only point toward the terms. "You have asked a difficult thing," he says. "Yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours. But if not, it will not." If you see me, there is the condition. Everything now hangs on whether Elisha's eyes remain fixed on the old man in the moment of his leaving. Not on his own hopes, not on his fear, not on the ground beneath his feet, but on Elijah, watching, present, not looking away. This is why he refused 3 times to be sent back. This is why he said, over and over, "I will not leave you." Because he must be there. He must be watching at the exact instant it happens, or the inheritance slips away and is lost. So they walk on, the 2 of them, talking together as they go, and then it comes. Suddenly, out of the sky, a chariot of fire and horses of fire appear and come between them, and the 2 men are separated, driven apart by the blaze, and Elijah goes up to heaven in a whirlwind. Wind and flame and the thunder of unseen horses, and the old prophet caught up into it, rising, lifted away from the earth he had walked so long. And Elisha sees it. He sees all of it. He does not look away, and he cries out, and his cry is a strange one, "My Father, my Father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel, my Father." There is the inheritance language again, the son crying out for the father, the heir watching the one he loves being taken from him, and he calls Elijah the chariots and horsemen of Israel, as though to say, "You are the true defense of this nation, you are the real strength of the army, more than all the horses and iron in the land." And then Elijah is gone, and Elisha sees him no more, and in his grief, Elisha takes hold of his own clothes and tears them apart, torn in 2, the way a man in that world tore his garments when someone he loved had died. The old prophet is gone, the friend, the master, the father, gone into the sky, and Elisha is standing alone on the eastern bank of the Jordan, with the 50 men far behind him across the water, and nothing left of the one he followed. Nothing, that is, except one thing. For as Elijah rose, the mantle fell, the heavy sheepskin cloak, the sign of the prophet, the garment that had struck the water and made a road through the river, slips from the ascending figure and drops to the ground at Elisha's feet. It lies there in the dust, and in that fallen cloak is the whole question of the story, laid out plain and physical for anyone to see. The man is gone. The office remains. The power is not in the person. It has settled into an object, a thing you can pick up with your hands, and the only question left is whether the younger man has the courage to reach down and take it. He does. He picks up the cloak that had fallen from Elijah, and then he turns and walks back to the bank of the Jordan, alone now, the first steps of a life he must live without the man who taught him to live it. He stands at the water, and he does exactly what he had seen the old man do. He takes the cloak. He strikes the water with it, but he does not strike it in silence. He calls out a question, and the question is the truest thing he could possibly say in that moment. Where now is the Lord? The God of Elijah? Where now? The master is gone. Was the power his alone, or was it always something greater than him? Something that could rest on another set of shoulders? Where now is the God who did all of this? Is he still here, or did he leave when the old man left? It is the question every heir asks, standing in a doorway that suddenly belongs to them and feels far too large. And the water answers. It divides to the right and to the left exactly as it had done for Elijah, and Elisha walks back across the riverbed on dry ground, and the 50 men of Jericho are watching him from the far side, and they see it happen. They see the river open, and they say to one another in words that settle the matter for the whole community of prophets, "The spirit of Elijah is resting on Elisha." The inheritance has passed. He saw the old man taken, the double portion is his, and now the man who could not bear to be sent home walks out of the water and into the rest of his life, carrying a cloak and a question, and a power he does not yet fully understand. That, more than anything, is the thread to hold on to tonight. Elisha did not seem to fully grasp the thing he had received. He knew he wanted it. He had held on to Elijah with everything in him precisely because he wanted it. But wanting a thing and understanding it are not the same. What he carried across the river was larger than he was, older than he was, and it would work through him again and again in ways he did not command and could not always predict. He was not the source. He was the willing hand. and it begins this new ministry, not with a battle but with a mending. The men of Jericho come to him. They have watched him part the river. They know now who stands among them, and they bring him a trouble that has been weighing on their city for a long time. "Look, our lord," they say, "this town is well situated, as you can see, but the water is bad and the land is unproductive. Picture the place. Jericho, an old and pleasant town, well positioned, ringed by the kind of country that ought to flourish. But something is wrong with the water. The spring that feeds the town runs foul. It brings sickness and death. It leaves the land barren, the crops failing, the ground refusing to yield. A city cannot survive without its water. Everything depends on that spring, and the spring is poisoned." Tradition remembers that spring by name, a source that still flows in that region, the water on which the whole town leaned. So they come to the prophet with the one problem no engineer among them could fix, and they wait to see what he will do. And here we meet, for the first time, the pattern that will run through the entire story like a bright thread. Elisha does not raise his hands to the sky and call down power in a blaze. He asks for something small, something ordinary, something you could find in any kitchen in the town. "Bring me a new bowl," he says, "and put salt in it." A new bowl. Salt, that is all. A clean, unused dish and a handful of the most common substance in the ancient world, the thing every household kept, the thing used to preserve and to season and to bless. There is nothing magical about salt. Poured into a poisoned spring, ordinary salt would do nothing, or worse than nothing. But that is exactly the point that the story is quietly making over and over from the very first sign. The power was never in the salt any more than it was in the cloak. The power moved through the humble thing when a willing hand carried it, and a word from God went with it. So they bring him the bowl, and he goes out to the spring. He stands at the source of the water, the place where it rises up out of the ground, the very heart of the trouble, and he throws the salt into it. And as he does, he speaks, and the words are not his own. He speaks for the one who sent him. "This is what the Lord says," he declares. "I have healed this water. Never again will it cause death or make the land unproductive. I have healed this water. Not I will heal it, not I hope to heal it. It is already done, spoken as a settled fact, because the word that carries it does not fail. And the account tells us simply and finally that the water has remained pure to this day, according to the word that Elisha had spoken. Never again death, never again barren ground. The spring made whole, the land freed to bear fruit, a whole town given back its life through a new bowl and a fistful of salt." Notice what kind of prophet this is going to be. The old master, Elijah, had lived a life of confrontation, standing against kings, calling down fire, waging a long and lonely war against the false gods of his age. His story crackled with challenge and drought and thunder. But the new prophet's opening sign is not confrontation. It is restoration. It is a poisoned spring made sweet, a dead land made fertile, a dying town made able to live again. Where the master had come with fire, the successor comes with healing. The mantle is the same. The hand that wears it works a little differently, and so the shape of things is set. An ordinary object in a willing hand, and God's word spoken over it, and something broken made whole. A cloak that parts a river, a bowl of salt that mends a spring. Remember the pattern, because it will return, and each time it returns it will reach a little further into ordinary human desperation. The next place it reaches is a small house, in a town in Samaria, into the life of a woman who has nothing left. She comes to Elisha in a state of terror, and she is not a stranger. She is the widow of a man who had belonged to the company of the prophets, one of those communities of men who lived the prophetic life. Her husband had served in that fellowship. He had been, in some sense, a colleague, a brother. And now he is dead, and she is alone, and the walls are closing in. "Your servant my husband is dead," she says to Elisha, "and you know that he revered the Lord. You knew him. He was one of yours. He was a good man, a man who feared God." And then she tells him the horror that is bearing down on her. "But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 sons as his slaves." Hear the weight of that. In that world, a debt did not simply vanish when a man died. It passed to his household, and if there was no money to pay, The creditor had the legal right to take the debtor's children and make them slaves until the debt was worked off. This widow, having already lost her husband, is now about to lose her sons, the last thing she has, the only future she can imagine, carried away into servitude because of money she cannot pay. She's standing at the edge of losing everything. And Elisha asks her a question, gently, the question of a man taking careful stock of what little there is to work with. "How can I help you?" he says. "Tell me, what do you have in your house?" What do you have in your house? Not what do you wish you had, not what did your husband leave, but what is actually there, right now, within your walls. And her answer is the answer of a truly destitute woman. "Your servant has nothing there at all," she says, "except a little olive oil. Nothing at all, except one small jar of oil. That is the whole of her estate. A widow, 2 sons about to be taken, and a single flask of oil in an empty house. It is hard to imagine a starting point smaller than that. But it is enough. That is the thing this whole story keeps insisting upon. The little jar of oil is enough, in the same way that the bowl of salt was enough, in the same way that the fallen cloak was enough. Not because of what it is, but because of the hand it passes through, and the word that is spoken over it. So Elisha gives her an instruction, and it is a strange one, and it asks something of her. He does not simply produce money out of the air. He requires her to act, to move, to reach out into her town and gather. "Go around and ask all your neighbours for empty jars," he tells her. "Don't ask for just a few." Don't ask for just a few. Underline those words, because everything that follows depends on them. Go to every neighbour. Borrow every empty vessel they will lend you. Do not be modest about it. Do not gather a small, cautious little collection. Gather as many as your arms and your son's arms can carry, and then gather more. Then go inside, he says, and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to one side. Shut the door. This is a private miracle, a domestic one, done behind closed walls with no crowd watching, no 50 prophets standing on a riverbank, just a mother and her 2 boys, alone in their home, doing what the prophet said. So she goes out into the town, and imagine her, moving from house to house, asking her neighbours for their empty jars, carrying them back, stacking them along the walls of her little house, until the room is crowded with borrowed vessels, a whole gathering of empty containers waiting to be filled. And then she goes inside with her sons, and she shuts the door just as she was told, and she begins to pour. She takes up her one small jar, the little olive oil that was all she had in the world, and she tips it over the mouth of the first borrowed vessel, and the oil runs out golden and steady, and it fills that vessel. And her son brings her another, and she pours into that one too, and it fills, and another, and another. The boys are working now, moving the full jars aside, bringing the empty ones close, keeping the line coming, and the mother keeps pouring, and the little jar in her hand does not run dry. It should have emptied at the first vessel. It keeps flowing. Vessel after vessel filled to the brim and set aside, the room slowly filling with the smell of fresh oil, the golden weight of it, jar after jar after jar. The text gives us the moment it stops, and it is one of the most beautiful moments in the whole account, because of what it reveals about how the miracle works. She keeps pouring, and when all the jars are full, she says to her son, "Bring me another one. Bring me another." She has not run out of oil, she wants to keep going. But her son replies, "There is not a jar left." And then, the account says, the oil stopped flowing. Sit with that for a moment, in the quiet of the night. The oil did not stop because the miracle was tired, or because a limit had been reached in heaven. The oil stopped because she ran out of containers. It stopped when the last vessel was full, and there was nothing left to pour into. The provision was precisely as large as the room she had made for it. If she had borrowed 100 jars would have been filled. If she had borrowed 10, only 10. The miracle poured itself out to the exact measure of her own boldness in gathering. Don't ask for just a few, the prophet had said, and now we understand why. The size of the answer was shaped by the size of her asking. She goes back to the prophet and tells him what has happened. This house full of oil where there had been nothing but a single small jar. And Elisha gives the final instruction, the one that turns the miracle into rescue. "Go, sell the oil and pay your debts," he says. "You and your sons can live on what is left. Sell it. Pay the creditor. Free your sons from the slavery that was bearing down on them. And then, with what remains, live. There is enough not only to erase the debt, but to sustain the family beyond it. The widow, who had nothing at all except a little olive oil, walks home with her sons safe and her future secure, all of it flowing out of one jar in a closed room, poured by a trembling, hopeful hand. And so the pattern holds and deepens. The cloak at the river, the bowl of salt at the spring, and now the small jar of oil in a poor woman's house. Each one an ordinary thing, each one made extraordinary, and each one reaching a little further into the places where people are most afraid, most cornered, most out of options, a river to cross, a town to save, a family about to be broken apart. The prophet who inherited the mantle turns, again and again, toward the desperate and the poor. But the road is long, and the night is young, and there is far more still to come. For not far from here, in a town called Shunem, there is a woman of some standing who has noticed a holy man passing by her door, and who is about to prepare a small room on her roof, never dreaming what will one day happen inside it. The town of Shunem sits on the southern slope of the hill called Moreh, looking out across the wide floor of the Jezreel Valley. It is good country, this, fertile, well-watered, the kind of land where barley grows tall and gold in the spring, and the harvest is worth the sweat it costs. It lies on an old road, one of the routes a travelling man would take moving up from the coast, from the high shoulder of Mount Carmel, down and across toward Jezreel and the country beyond. And along that road, more than once, sometimes with the seasons, a certain man passed by. A man on foot, or with a servant, plainly dressed, unhurried, going about the work of a prophet who kept no fixed home but moved among the towns and the companies of prophets scattered through the land. In one of the houses that faced that road lived a woman. The account does not give us her name, it never does. She's remembered as the Shunammite, the woman of Shunem, and that is all. But it tells us plainly that she was a woman of substance, not poor, not cornered, not out of options like the widow with her single jar of oil. This is a different kind of person entirely, and the story wants us to see the difference. She was, the text says, a well-to-do woman, a woman of some standing in her town, the sort who had servants, who owned land, who could act on her own judgment and expect to be heeded. She was married to a man who was, by the story's own quiet admission, old, and she was, in the reckoning of her world, childless. Hold those two facts side by side gently in the dark. A woman of means, and no child. In the world she lived in, those two things did not sit easily together. Wealth without an heir was a strange, hollow kind of abundance, a house full of good things and no one to inherit it, land that would pass in time to someone else's name. Every measure of security she had built around herself had a shadow at its centre, an absence she could do nothing about because her husband was old and the years for such hopes were past. And so, we are meant to understand, she had done what people do when a hope becomes unbearable. She had put it away. She had organised her life so as to expect nothing. She had made her peace with the shape of things. And then this man began to pass by her door. She noticed him. That is where the whole story begins. Not with a miracle, not with a word from heaven, but with a woman noticing a stranger on the road and drawing a quiet conclusion about him. She saw him often enough to form a judgment, and her judgment was this, that he was a holy man of God. Not a peddler, not a wandering beggar, not one more traveller to be fed and forgotten. A man set apart. A man who carried something. She acted on that conclusion, as she seems to have acted on everything, with a directness that is one of the most striking things about her. She urged him to stop and eat, and so, whenever he passed that way, he would turn into her house and take a meal. It became a habit, a rhythm. The prophet's road ran past her door, and her door was open, and there was always bread and a place at the table. But she wanted to do more than feed him in passing, and here we come to the little scene that the account gives us with such care, because it tells us so much about who she was. She goes to her husband. She does not wait to be asked, and she does not merely suggest. She proposes a plan, fully formed, and she gives her reasoning. I know, she says, that this man who often comes our way is a holy man of God. She has watched him. She is sure of it. And so, she says, let us make a small room on the roof for him, and put in it a bed and a table and a chair and a lamp, so that whenever he comes to us he can stay there, Listen to that inventory, because the story troubles to list it, and things listed in Scripture are things that matter. A bed, a table, a chair, a lamp. It is the whole furniture of a settled human life, compressed into one small chamber on a rooftop, a place to sleep, a place to eat, a place to sit, a light against the dark. She's not offering the prophet a corner and a mat. She's building him a home within her home, a permanent room, walled and roofed, his own, standing ready for him whether he comes tomorrow or 3 months from now. She has thought about how a man lives. She has thought about what he would need to rest, to work, to read by lamplight in the evening, and she provides all of it, out of her own means, on her own initiative, persuading her husband to make it so. There is something almost tender in the smallness of it. The roof chamber, the single bed, the one lamp, and there is something quietly enormous in the generosity, because she asks for nothing. She does not build the room in hope of reward. She builds it because she has recognized who this man is, and because recognizing greatness, she wishes to honor it in the only currency she truly commands: a warm room, a made bed, a light left burning. And so it is done. The room is built and furnished. And now, when Elisha comes that way, he does not merely stop for a meal and move on. He turns in and he goes up to his room, and he lies down. He has a home in Shunem, a place that is his. Somewhere on that long itinerant road between Carmel and the valley, one woman has made a still point for him, a resting place, and he takes it gratefully, again and again. Now here is where the story turns from hospitality towards something deeper, and it turns, characteristically, on Elisha's desire to give something back. A prophet is not comfortable only receiving. He lies in the room she built, and he feels the weight of her kindness, and he wants to answer it. So one day, resting up in the chamber, he says to his servant Gehazi, and this is the first time we hear that name spoken with any weight, Gehazi, who will matter greatly before this cycle is done. He says, "Call the Shunammite woman." Gehazi calls her, and she comes and stands in the doorway, and Elisha speaks to her through his servant, in the formal way of the time, honoring her from a slight distance. "You have gone to all this trouble for us," he says. "Now what can be done for you? Can we speak on your behalf to the king or the commander of the army? Think about what he is offering. This is no small thing." Elisha is a man with access, a man whose word carries to the highest places in the kingdom. He is offering to use his influence, to intervene for her at the level of the throne, or of the general who commands the soldiers. In a world where the powerful decided the fate of the ordinary with a nod, that offer could mean protection, land secured, disputes settled, safety in an unsafe country. It is the kind of favour most people would seize with both hands, and she declines it. Her answer is one of the great small lines of the story, and it tells you everything about her contentment and her self-possession. "I have a home among my own people," she says. "I have a home among my own people. I need nothing from the king. I need no word carried to the commander of the army. I'm not seeking advancement or protection or a place higher than the one I hold. I am settled. I am secure. I am at peace where I am." She turns down access to the throne with the calm of a woman who has everything she has decided to want. And it is precisely here, in that graceful refusal, that the story finds its way to the wound she has never spoken of. Because Elisha is left holding an unanswered impulse. He wants to reward her, and she has closed the ordinary doors. So he turns to Gehazi and asks simply, what then can be done for her? And Gehazi, who has been in this house, who has eyes, who has perhaps heard the servants talk, or perhaps only noticed the thing that anyone would notice, Gehazi says the thing she herself has never once said aloud in the whole account. She has no son, he says, and her husband is old. There it is, spoken at last, not by her. She has offered the room, urged the meal, refused the favour, declared her contentment, and never once mentioned the absence at the centre of her life. It takes a servant standing to one side to name it. She has no son, and her husband is old. The two facts we were given at the very beginning, now laid down bare in the prophet's hearing, the shadow at the heart of all that abundance finally dragged into the light. Elisha hears it, and he says, "Call her." Gehazi calls her again, and again she comes and stands in the doorway. She stands in the doorway. The account is careful about this small physical detail. on the threshold, at the edge, neither fully in nor fully out, which is exactly where a person stands when something is about to be said to them that they are not ready to hear. And Elisha speaks. "About this time next year," he says, "you will hold a son in your arms." Now stop, in the stillness of the night, and feel what those words do to a woman who has spent years teaching herself not to want this. She has built a whole architecture of peace around the acceptance that it would never come. She has said, in effect, with her whole ordered life, "I do not hope for this any more." And now a holy man of God, a man whose word she herself declared trustworthy, a man she has fed and housed and honoured, stands in her own house and tells her that within a year she will hold a child of her own. And she does not rejoice. She does not fall to her knees in gratitude. Her reaction is far more human and far more heartbreaking than that. She recoils. "No, my lord," she says, "no man of God, do not lie to your servant. Do not lie to me. Do not do this to me. Do not raise this hope in me only to have it fall." It is not disbelief in the way we usually mean disbelief. It is the flinch of a person who has been hurt by this exact hope before, who has already grieved this loss privately 1,000 times, and who cannot bear to have the wound reopened by a promise that might not hold. She would almost rather he had said nothing. To be offered the one thing you have taught yourself not to want, offered it plainly by someone you trust, is not simple joy. It is terror. Because now the door she had closed and sealed and made her peace with is standing open again, and through it comes a wind she is not sure she can survive. Do not lie to your servant. It is the sound of a heart protecting itself, and it is, whether she knows it or not, the first note of everything that is coming. Because the story is going to give her the son, and then the story is going to take him away, and she, of all people, seems already to sense, standing there in the doorway, flinching from the promise, that a hope this large has a shadow just as large, and that to receive it is to become, once again, someone who can lose. But the word is spoken, and the word holds. The account moves forward with its usual quiet economy. The woman conceived, and she gave birth to a son, at that season, the very next year, just as Elisha had told her. The impossible thing happened in the ordinary way. A full term, a birth, a child laid at last in the arms that had been empty. The house that had everything but an heir now had one. The lamp in the prophet's room, and now a new light in the whole house. She held her son, and then the account does something merciful and cruel at once. It skips ahead. It lets the boy grow. We are given no scenes of those years, no glimpses of the childhood, only the quiet passage of time, and then, one morning, we find him old enough to walk out of the house on his own 2 legs and go looking for his father. It is harvest. The barley is being cut. The fields around Shunem are full of men working in the heat, the reapers bent to the standing grain, the sheaves gathering, the whole valley busy with the great annual labour of bringing in the crop. And the boy, old enough now to want to be where the men are, where his father is, goes out to the field to be with his father among the reapers. And then, without warning, in the middle of that ordinary golden morning, something goes terribly wrong inside him. "My head," he says. "My head." That is all. To his father, out among the harvesters, the boy cries out that his head hurts. We do not know exactly what it was. Readers across the centuries have guessed. The beating sun on a small bare head in the open field, a stroke, a sudden bleeding somewhere deep in the brain, some swift and merciless thing that no one in that valley had any power to stop. The story does not diagnose it. It only lets us hear the boy's small voice, twice, complaining of his head, and then it moves with awful speed. The father does not understand what is happening. How could he? He tells the servant, "Carry him to his mother. Carry him home. His mother will know what to do. His mother will hold him and cool his face, and it will pass." So the servant lifts the boy and carries him down out of the fields, along the road, into the house, and sets him on his mother's lap. And there she holds him. Through the late morning, through the climbing heat, she holds her son on her knees, the son she was told not to hope for, the son she flinched to be promised, the son she has held now for years, and she holds him as the morning burns toward noon. And at noon, on her lap, in her arms, in the house she built and furnished and made secure, the boy dies. There is no scream in the text. There is no collapse. What the woman does next is one of the most extraordinary sequences in all of Scripture, and its power lies entirely in its restraint. She does not fall to the floor. She does not wake the house with her weeping. She does not send for her husband in the field to tell him what has happened. She rises, carrying the body of her dead child, and she climbs the stairs to the roof, to the prophet's room, the one she built with her own foresight, with its bed and its table and its chair and its lamp, and she lays her son down on the bed of the man of God, and she shuts the door on him, and she goes out. Think of that. She lays the dead boy on Elisha's own bed, as if to say without a word, "This is your promise, and now here it is, cold, in the room I made for you." She closes the door. She tells no one. She does not explain. She keeps the whole weight of it locked inside her, behind that shut door and behind her own composed face, and she goes down and begins to move with terrible, deliberate purpose. She calls to her husband, out in the field, where he has no idea that his son is dead in an upstairs room, and she says, "Please send me one of the servants and a donkey, so I can go to the man of God quickly and return." Quickly. She's already thinking of the road, already reaching in her mind for Carmel, and her husband, who does not know, asks a reasonable question. "Why go to him today?" he says. "It's not the new moon or the Sabbath. There is no festival, no day of assembly, no reason to seek out the prophet. What could be so urgent?" And she answers him with a single word that will echo through the rest of this story. "It's all right," she says. "Shalom. It is well. It is peace." She stands there with her son lying dead on the prophet's bed, and she looks her husband in the face and says, "It is well. It is not, of course, well. Nothing is well." But she will not say the words. She will not speak the death aloud, not to her husband, not to the servant, not to anyone. Because to speak it would be to accept it, and she has not come to accept it. She has come to undo it. That single word, "it is well," is not a lie, and it is not a comfort. It is a wall she builds around her grief so that she can carry it in one piece, unshattered, all the way to the only man she believes can do anything about it. It is the second great act of faith in her story. The first was building the room, and this is standing over her dead child and refusing to call him dead. She saddles the donkey, and she gives her servant an order that tells you everything about the state of her heart underneath that iron calm. "Lead on," she says. "Don't slow down for me unless I tell you. Do not slow the pace. Drive the animal forward. Whatever you think, whatever seems proper, do not ease off. Only go." 20 miles lie between Shunem and Mount Carmel. 20 miles of that valley road under the noon and afternoon sun, the same country her son had walked out into that very morning, and she rides it hard, a mother with a dead child behind her and a word she will not speak locked in her chest, driving toward the one man who once stood in her doorway and dared her to hope again. And Elisha, up on the mountain, sees her coming. From the high slope of Carmel he looks out and sees, far off, a woman on a donkey coming fast up the road, and he knows her. It is the Shunammite. Something in the sight of her arrives at his heart before she does, because he turns at once to Gehazi and says, "Look, there's the Shunammite woman. Run to meet her and ask her, 'Are you all right? Is your husband all right? Is your child all right? Are you all right? Is your husband? Is your child?'" 3 questions, thrown down the mountainside ahead of her arrival, and the last of them lands exactly where the wound is. Gehazi runs down the road to meet her, and puts the 3 questions to her. One by one, out there on the open road with the servant and the tired donkey, and the 20 miles of dust behind her. And she gives Gehazi the same word she gave her husband. "It is well," she says. "Shalom. Everything is fine." She will not open the wall for the servant any more than she opened it for her husband. Gehazi is not the one she has ridden 20 miles to reach. She keeps the truth locked, and she keeps riding straight past the servant and his careful questions, up the mountain toward the man himself. And when she reaches Elisha, the man of God standing there on the height where she has come to find him, the wall comes down at last. She does not speak politely. She does not stand at a distance and observe the courtesies of the doorway. She comes to him, and she takes hold of his feet. She falls at his feet and grips them, clinging to him, and for the first time in this whole ordered, composed, unshakable performance of hers, her control breaks, and the raw thing underneath comes out into the open. Gehazi, scandalized, moves to push her away. This is not how one approaches the prophet. This is not seemly. But Elisha stops him. "Leave her alone," he says. "She's in bitter distress, but the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me why." Even he does not yet know what has happened. He only knows the depth of the anguish clinging to his feet, and he knows it is real, and he will not let it be brushed off. And now she speaks, and what she says is not a report of a death. It is an accusation and a reproach, and the reopening of the exact wound she named in her doorway a year and more ago. "Did I ask you for a son, my lord?" she says. "Didn't I tell you, don't raise my hopes?" There it is again. The flinch made flesh. "I never asked for this. I told you not to do this to me. I told you not to give me a hope I could lose, and you gave it anyway, and now look." She had protected herself for years, and he had reached past her defences and set a living child in her arms, and now the very thing she had feared above all things has come to pass, and she has ridden 20 miles to lay it at his feet. She does not even now say the word "died." She says only, "Don't raise my hopes," but the meaning is unmistakable, and Elisha understands it completely. The boy is dead. The promise is lying cold on the prophet's own bed in a shut room in Shunem, and the woman who was told not to hope has come to demand that the man who raised her hope now answer for it. And Elisha turns at once to Gehazi. He speaks quickly, urgently, with none of the composure that has marked him until now. "Tuck your cloak into your belt," he tells the servant. "Take my staff in your hand and run. Gird yourself for the road. Take the thing in my hand that is closest to being an extension of me, and go. Go fast." And the instructions that follow are as strange as they are absolute. Don't greet anyone you meet, and if anyone greets you, do not answer. Speak to no one. Do not stop for the customary blessings that pass between travellers on a road, the exchange of peace that could stretch to minutes, to a shared cup, to an hour of courtesy under a tree. There is no time for shalom now. The thing that must be carried up that mountain and down again and across 20 miles of valley is life itself, and life will not wait for the pleasantries of the road. Lay my staff on the boy's face. The staff, the rod the prophet carries, the object again, the mantle, the bowl of salt, the jars of oil, and now the staff, the ordinary thing in the willing hand through which the word of God has moved before. Elisha sends it ahead in the grip of his servant, and there is a logic to it that anyone who has followed the pattern can feel. It has worked this way from the beginning: an object, a hand, a word. And so Gehazi runs, and the staff runs with him, down the height of Carmel and out into the plain, and behind him the mother refuses to leave, because she does. She hears the instruction, and she does not follow it. She has ridden 20 miles for the man, not for his rod, and she will not settle for the rod now. "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live," she says, and there is something in that oath, that very phrasing, that any listener to this whole story will recognize, for it is the exact vow Elisha himself made to Elijah on the road that would not let him be sent away. "I will not leave you. I will not leave you." She turns his own inheritance of stubbornness back upon him. She has learned the grammar of refusal from the master of it, and she uses it now, planting herself at his side and refusing every dismissal, exactly as he once refused Elijah's 3 attempts to send him back. And so he rises, and he goes with her, and the two of them set out down the mountain toward Shunem, following the dust of the servant who has already run ahead. We are not told what passes between them on that long road down. 20 miles is a full day's hard travel, and the text gives us none of it. No conversation, no comfort offered, no explanation of what he intends. There is only the walking. The prophet and the bereaved mother moving together across the Jezreel valley in the heat, and somewhere ahead of them, a man with a staff, not stopping, not speaking, closing the distance to a shut room in a house on the southern slope of the hill of Moreh. Gehazi reaches the house first. He climbs to the upper chamber, the room built into the wall, with its bed and its table and its chair and its lamp, and he does exactly as he was told. He lays the staff on the boy's face, and nothing happens. The text is stark about it. There is no sound and no response, no warmth, no stirring, no breath, no flutter of the eyelids. The rod lies across the still face of the dead child, and the child stays dead. And Gehazi turns and goes back down the road to meet the prophet, and the report he carries is a single, hollow line. The boy has not awakened. And here the pattern breaks. Here the story quietly tells us something it has not told us before. The object alone is not the thing. The staff in Gehazi's hand did not carry the power, because the power was never in the wood. It was never in the salt or the bowl or the jar or the cloak as objects in themselves. The pattern is not magic. It is not the transfer of some force stored up in the prophet's belongings. What was missing on that bed was the prophet himself, the praying, labouring, God-facing man, and no borrowed rod could stand in for him. Some part of this journey has been leading to that lesson, and it lands here, in the failure of the staff, in the flat report of a servant who did as he was told and watched nothing happen. So Elisha comes himself. He arrives at the house, and he climbs the stairs to the room he knows so well, the room she built for him, the bed she furnished, the walls she raised so that he would have a place to lay his head when he passed through her town. And there, on the bed she made for the living prophet, lies her dead son, the child laid out on the very mattress where the man of God once slept. And Elisha goes in, and he shuts the door. He shuts the door on the two of them, himself and the dead boy, exactly as she shut the door when she laid the child there and told no one. The room becomes a sealed thing, a chamber apart from the world, with the mother waiting outside and the servant below, and the whole grieving household held back beyond the wall. What happens inside happens in private. There are no witnesses to the labour that follows. There is only the prophet, the child, and the shut door. And the first thing he does is pray. He prays to the Lord. The text does not record the words, only the act, that before he touches the boy, before he does anything with his hands, he turns his face to God. Whatever is about to happen will not be his doing, and he begins by saying so, in the privacy of that room, in words we are not allowed to hear. Then he lies down. He gets up onto the bed and he stretches himself out upon the dead child, and the description of it is so precise and so strange that it has arrested readers for 3,000 years. Mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hands. He lays his own living mouth against the cold mouth of the boy, his own open eyes against the shut eyes, his own warm hands against the still hands. He makes of his own body a map laid over the body of death, matching himself point for point to the shape of the child, as though he means to pour the living pattern of himself down into the dead one. He is a grown man, and the boy is small, old enough to have run into the harvest field and cried out about his head, but a child still, and so Elisha folds himself down over that small frame, covering it, pressing the whole living length of himself against the whole dead length of the boy. There is something almost unbearably intimate about it. This is not a gesture performed at a distance, not a hand waved over a spot, not a word spoken across a room. It is contact of the most complete and vulnerable kind. A man laying his breathing face against the face of a corpse, his eyes against sightless eyes, closing every gap between the living and the dead until there is no space left between them at all. Whatever passes between the world of the living and the world of the dead in that room, it passes across the narrowest possible margin, skin against skin, breath against breathless mouth. And the body grows warm, not restored, not raised, not sitting up or crying out or opening its eyes, just warm. The flesh that had gone cold begins, under the pressure of the living body stretched over it, to take on heat. The word the Hebrew uses is a word for warming, and it carries with it the whole slow physical reality of what is happening. This is not a snap of the fingers, not an instantaneous reversal. It is gradual, it is incremental. It is the difference between a stone in shadow and a stone in sun, felt slowly through the palm. The child's flesh grows warm, and that is all. That is the first thing that changes, and it changes by degrees, and it takes the whole weight of the prophet's body pressed down over the whole length of the boy to bring even that much heat back into the cold. Then Elisha gets up. He breaks the contact. He rises from the bed and he walks. The text says he walked in the house, back and forth, to and fro, pacing the room. Picture it. A man who has just felt the first warmth return to a dead child's skin, and he does not press on, does not double his effort, does not shout or pray louder, or throw himself back down at once. He gets up and he paces, back and forth across the small upper chamber, past the table and the chair and the lamp, turning at the wall and coming back. Whatever this labour is, it has a rhythm to it, and the rhythm includes waiting. It includes stepping back, It includes the strange discipline of breaking off from the very thing that seemed to be working, and walking the floor and letting whatever has begun continue its slow work in the boy without the pressure of his hands. We are not told what is in his mind as he paces. We are not told whether he prays as he walks, or whether he simply moves because the body of a man labouring at the edge of death cannot hold still. But the pacing is there in the text, deliberately recorded, one full circuit of the room, and it slows the whole scene down to the pace of held breath. Outside the door the mother waits, below the servant waits, and inside the prophet walks the floor over a child who is warm but not yet alive, and the seconds stretch out under his feet. Then he goes back to the bed. He climbs up and stretches himself over the boy a second time, mouth to mouth again, the whole matching pressure of the living body laid over the dead one once more. And this time the thing that has been building beneath the surface finally breaks through. The boy sneezes. He sneezes 7 times. It is one of the strangest, most specific, most vividly human details in all of Scripture. Not a gasp, not a groan, not the theatrical sitting bolt upright of a stage resurrection. A sneeze, 7 of them. The sharp, involuntary, almost comical convulsion of air being violently expelled from a body that has just begun, again, to breathe. There is something profoundly right about it, something that no invented story would have thought to include. The first sign of returning life is not dignified. It is the body doing what bodies do when the passages of breath, so long closed, are suddenly forced open again, clearing themselves, seizing, choking back into function. 7 times the small chest heaves and the sound tears out of him, and each one is proof, undeniable and unignorable, that air is moving in and out of a boy who lay cold and still an hour before. 7. The number runs like a thread through this whole cycle. 7 dips will yet be commanded of a general in a river. 7 has haunted this narrative, and will haunt it again. The number of completion, of fullness, of a work brought all the way to its finish. And here it counts out the return of breath itself, 7 convulsions of a living body, and then, on the far side of the 7th sneeze, the boy opens his eyes. He opens his eyes. The eyes that Elisha pressed his own eyes against, the shut and sightless eyes, come open in the dim light of the upper room, and the child is looking out at the world again. He is alive, warm, breathing, blinking. Alive on the bed his mother made for the prophet, in the room she built with her own foresight and her own means, in the town on the slope of the hill overlooking the valley. And only now, with the boy's eyes open and the labour finished, does Elisha call for Gehazi. "Call the Shunammite," he says, "bring the mother." He does not carry the child out to her. He does not announce the miracle from the doorway or make a spectacle of the moment. He simply summons her, and she comes, up the stairs, into the room, to the very threshold of the place where she had laid her dead son and shut the door on him. And Elisha says only, take your son, 2 words. After everything, the claps in the field, the noon death on her lap, the shut door, the 20 miles, the grip on his feet, the reproach flung in his face, the return, the shut door again, the prayer, the pressing, the pacing, the 7 sneezes. After all of it, 2 words, take your son, and she comes in and she falls at his feet. She bows to the ground before him, all the way down, the second time in this story that this composed and iron-willed woman has gone to the floor before the prophet. But this time, it is not anguish that puts her there, not the grip of desperate reproach. This time it is something that has no adequate name, some fusion of gratitude and awe and grief turned inside out into joy. She bows to the ground, and then she rises, and she takes up her son, her living, breathing, warm-flesh son, and she carries him out. And the text lets her go without another word from her. She does not speak. She has spoken enough in this story. She has said, "It is well," over a dead child, and "don't raise my hopes" to the man who raised them. And now, at the moment the words might finally come, there are none. She takes her son and she goes out, and the door of the story closes gently behind her. It is the first full peak of everything that has come before. 3 episodes have been climbing toward this. The room built in faith, the promise given against her fear, the child born and lost and now given back, and they resolve here, on this bed, in this warmth, in these 7 sneezes, in a mother walking out of a room with the impossible weight of a living boy in her arms. And then, as it always does, the story breathes out. It moves on. It leaves the mountain of that moment and comes down into the ordinary hunger of ordinary days, because Elisha's work was never only in the great crises. It was in the pot on the fire and the bread in the sack, in the daily business of feeding men who followed him. There is a famine in the land, not the drought of fire and no rain that mark the older prophets' days, but a hunger nonetheless, a hard season when the fields do not give enough, and the companies of prophets who gather around Elisha must eat what they can find. And Elisha comes back to Gilgal, where a company of the prophets is seated before him, sitting at his feet, waiting in the posture of disciples. And because they are hungry, and because there are many of them, he tells his servant to put the large pot on the fire and cook a stew for them all. A communal meal drawn from whatever the land will yield in a lean year, thrown together in one great pot over the flames. So one of them goes out into the fields to gather herbs, greens, whatever growing thing might thicken a stew and stretch it further, and he finds a wild vine, a vine no one recognizes, and from it he gathers a lapful of wild gourds. He does not know what they are, he only knows they are food-shaped, that they grow, that they might fill a pot, and he brings his lapful back and shreds them into the stew, cutting them up and stirring them in without a name for what he is adding, and the pot bubbles on and the men gather to eat, and they taste it, and the moment the stew touches their mouths they cry out, a cry of alarm, of real fear. "O man of God, there is death in the pot!" There is death in the pot. Something in those wild gourds is bitter, is wrong, is poison. The body knows it at once. The tongue recoils. The men shout the warning down the length of the meal. The very food meant to sustain them in a famine has become a threat to their lives. Scarcity had driven a hungry man into unknown fields, and the unknown fields had answered with poison. They cannot eat it. The whole pot, the whole meal, the precious stew cooked up against the hunger, is death, and they know it, and they call out to the only one who might do something. And Elisha says, "Get some flour, bring meal." And he takes it and throws it into the pot, an ordinary handful of ground grain cast into the poisoned stew. And he says, "Serve it to the people to eat. Pour it out, feed them." And whatever was death in the pot is death no longer. The flour goes in, the word goes with it, and the stew that had recoiled on their tongues becomes wholesome, becomes food, becomes the meal it was meant to be. There is nothing harmful in the pot. The men eat, and they live, and the famine is held back one more day by a handful of flour and a prophet's word. The object again. The ordinary thing, the willing hand, the word, and scarcity turned back into sustenance. And then, almost at once, the same theme comes around a second time, from a different direction. A man arrives from Baal-Shalisha, a place off to the west, and he comes bearing the first fruits of his harvest, the first and best of what his land produced that year, the portion set aside as an offering. 20 loaves of barley bread he brings, and some heads of new grain in his sack. 20 loaves. In an ordinary household, a meal for a family. But here there is a company of prophets, and the number the text gives is 100 men, 20 loaves, 100 hungry mouths. And Elisha says, "Give it to the people to eat. Set it before them all. Feed the 100 with the 20. And his servant, the practical voice, the one who counts loaves and counts men and knows the arithmetic will not close, objects. How can I set this before 100 men? How can 20 loaves feed 100? It is not enough. It cannot be enough. Anyone can see it cannot be enough. It is the same arithmetic that has stopped every generous impulse cold. There is not enough to go around, so why begin? And Elisha says it again, and this time he says why. Give it to the people to eat, for this is what the Lord says, they will eat and have some left over. It is not Elisha's promise. It is the word of the Lord carried through him. The same authority that healed the water and multiplied the oil and warmed the cold flesh of a boy. They will eat, and there will be food left over. And so the servant does as he is told. He sets the 20 loaves and the new grain before 100 men, and they eat, all of them, 100 hungry men in a famine year. And when they have eaten, there is bread left over, just as the word had said. The loaves outlast the hunger. The little becomes enough, and more than enough. For anyone who knows the whole of the story that Scripture will one day tell, these 2 small miracles at Gilgal ring forward across the centuries. There will come another day, by another body of water, when a far greater hunger sits down on the grass, and a handful of barley loaves is broken and passed, and thousands eat, and baskets of fragments are gathered up when they are done. The pattern is being written here, in the lean fields around Gilgal, in a poisoned pot made whole, and 20 loaves stretched over 100 men. The God who does not let his people starve, whose word turns scarcity into surplus, whose prophets are set among the hungry to feed them. It is quieter here than it will be by the Sea of Galilee, but it is the same music sounded early, in the days of the ploughman who took up a fallen mantle. And then the story lifts its eyes from the pot and the bread and looks north, across the border, into the land of Israel's enemies, to a great house in Damascus and a great man who lives in it. For the next thing this cycle will show us is that the God of Elisha is not only the God of famine-struck prophets in Gilgal, but the God who can reach across a national frontier and lay his hand on the proudest soldier of a hostile kingdom. There is a man in Aram named Naaman. He is commander of the army of the king of Aram, the highest military office in the land, the general who stands nearest the throne, and the text piles honour upon him. He is a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. Through him the Lord had given victory. Read that slowly. The God of Israel, working through a foreign general to deliver a foreign nation, even at times in its wars against Israel itself. Naaman does not know it. Naaman worships the gods of Damascus. But the God who moved the mantle at the Jordan is already at work in the life of this Aramean soldier, long before Naaman has ever heard the name of a prophet in Samaria. He is a valiant soldier, a man of great stature, of proven courage, of the kind of reputation that fills a room before its owner enters it. And he has one flaw, one thing the honours cannot touch, one word the text sets down at the end of all his titles like a stone. But he had leprosy, all the victory, all the regard, all the standing at the king's right hand, and a disease in his flesh that no army can defeat and no rank can cure. The greatest soldier of the age carries in his own body an enemy he cannot conquer. Now we come to the river itself, and to the moment the whole journey north has been bending toward. Naaman has travelled far. He has come down from Damascus with horses and chariots, with silver and gold and fine garments loaded for a fee, expecting to purchase his cure the way a great man purchases everything else. He has stood at the door of Elisha's house in Samaria, this general, this commander, this man whose name filled rooms, and the prophet has not even come out to meet him. A messenger came instead, a servant, sent to the door with 7 words that stung worse than the disease. Go, wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be clean. And Naaman was furious. We have already seen his anger, the pride flaring up hot against the insult of it. He had pictured something else entirely. He had imagined the prophet coming out to stand before him, calling on the name of the Lord his God, waving his hand over the diseased place with ceremony and dignity. A great man expects a great cure. Instead, he is handed an errand any peasant could run, and pointed toward a muddy little river when the broad, clear waters of Abana and Pharpar run through his own city of Damascus. Are not the rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? He turns his chariot and goes off in a rage, ready to carry his leprosy home again, uncured, because the cure was too small for his dignity to stoop to. And here, at the pivot of the whole story, the ones who save Naaman are not kings and not prophets. They are his servants. They come near to him, this furious, wounded, powerful man, and they speak to him gently, and the gentleness is itself a kind of courage, for men in a rage are dangerous to approach. My father, they say to him, and the word is tender, a word of a household that loves the master it serves. My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? Think of it. If Elisha had sent him on a hard campaign, a long fast, a difficult and expensive rite, a journey to some distant shrine, Naaman would have thrown himself into it without a second thought, because difficulty flatters a great man. Great tasks are the currency he understands, but the prophet has asked for nothing hard. He has only said, wash and be clean. How much more then when he tells you simply, wash and be cleansed? It is one of the quietest and most profound arguments in the whole of Scripture, and it is spoken by nobody the text bothers to name. The servants of Naaman see what their master cannot see through the fog of his pride. The obstacle was never the smallness of the river. The obstacle was the largeness of the man. It was never going to cost Naaman his money or his strength. It was going to cost him something far more expensive, his sense of his own importance. It would require him to do a small, humble, undignified thing in a foreign river at the word of a prophet who would not even come to the door. And that, for a great man, is the hardest asking of all. So Naaman listens. That, too, is part of his greatness, that a commander of armies can be turned by the soft words of his own servants and does not strike them down for their boldness. He listens and something in him bends. The rage goes out of him and he does the small thing. He goes down to the Jordan. Picture it. The general climbs down from the chariot at the water's edge. He unfastens the armour, the marks of his rank, the fine cloth that covered the ruin in his skin. He lays aside the standing and the honour and the regard, and he stands there at the brown, unremarkable river in a body he cannot heal, in the presence of servants who have followed him down to the bank. And he wades in. The water closes cold around his ankles, his knees, his waist, and he does the humiliating, ordinary thing the prophet's servant told him to do. He dips himself under. Once. He comes up. Nothing. The flesh is as it was. Twice. Nothing. A third time, and a fourth, and a fifth. Nothing changes. Imagine what runs through him each time he breaks the surface and looks down at the same disease still written on his arms. Every dip is a fresh chance for the pride to come roaring back, a fresh temptation to climb out of the water and call the whole thing a farce and go home unchanged. 6 times he goes under, and 6 times he rises, and 6 times he is still a leper. It would have been the easiest thing in the world to stop at 6, to decide the prophet had lied, that the river was only a river, that a great man had made himself a fool for nothing. But the word had said 7, and Naaman, having chosen obedience, keeps it all the way to the end. He goes down a 7th time, the number of completeness, the number of the days of creation, the number by which God finishes what he begins. He dips himself in the Jordan 7 times according to the word of the man of God. And on the 7th, when he comes up out of the water and looks down, the disease is gone. The text does not reach for grand language. It reaches instead for the tenderest image it can find. His flesh was restored, like the flesh of a young boy, like a small child. The scarred, hardened, corrupted skin of a lifelong soldier made new as an infant's. Soft, unblemished, whole. The scholars will debate for centuries exactly what the disease was. The Hebrew word covers a wide territory, and the ailment might have been leprosy in the strict sense, or another wasting affliction of the skin, a scaling or a whitening the ancient world lumped together under one dreaded name. But whatever it was, it is simply gone. The body that had carried an enemy no army could defeat is clean. The great man stands in the river reborn, dripping, staring at hands that look like they belong to someone who has never known a wound. And the man who came looking to buy a cure has been given something he could never have purchased, and it was given only when he stopped trying to buy it and simply obeyed. He does not go home, he turns back. He and his whole company go back up the road to the man of God, and this time Naaman does not stand outside in his chariot waiting to be honoured. This time the general comes and stands before Elisha, and everything is reversed. And out of his mouth comes a confession that no prophet coerced from him, no argument forced upon him. A confession that rises straight out of what has happened in his own flesh. Now I know, he says, that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Sit with the size of that. This is a man who has spent his whole life at the shrines of Damascus, whose victories he had once credited to the gods of Aram, whose entire world was built on the assumption that his nation and its deities were as great as any other. And a single obedient act in a foreign river has undone all of it. He does not say, "This prophet is powerful." He does not say the God of Israel is one God among many and a useful one. He says there is no God in all the earth, no God anywhere in any land among any people, except this one, the God of Israel. The enemy general, the outsider, the worshipper of foreign gods becomes in this moment the most complete confessor of the true God that the entire cycle will produce. Not a prophet, not a king of Israel. A foreign soldier, dripping Jordan water, standing in the doorway of a house in Samaria. And then, in his gratitude, he tries to give. It is instinct in a great man to repay a great gift. He presses upon Elisha the treasure he brought, the silver, the gold, the changes of fine clothing, the whole worth of a general's ransom laid out before the prophet. "Please," he says, accept a gift from your servant. He is not trying to buy the miracle anymore. The miracle is already his. He is trying to honor the one through whom it came. But Elisha will not take it. As surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, he says, I will not accept a thing. And though Naaman urges him, pressing, insisting, in the way men do who cannot bear to be simply given something for nothing, the prophet refuses. He refuses and will not be moved. There is a reason he refuses, and it is the whole point of the story. If Elisha takes the silver, the healing becomes a transaction. It becomes a thing that was bought, a thing that had a price, a service rendered by a clever holy man for a fee. And it was none of those things. It was grace, free, unearned, unpurchasable grace, poured out on an enemy of Israel by the God of Israel for no reason but mercy. To take payment would be to lie about what had happened in that river. Elisha will not let the gift be turned back into a purchase. And so the treasure goes home to Damascus untouched, and the general goes home healed and unindebted, carrying nothing he paid for and everything he was given. But before he goes, Naaman makes a request so strange and so tender that it has moved readers for 3,000 years. He asks, this commander of a hostile army, for 2 mule loads of earth, 2 mule loads of Israelite soil to carry back across the border to Aram. Why? Because Naaman has understood something with the fierce literalness of a new convert. He believes now that there is only one true God, and that God is the God of this land, of Israel, of the very ground he is standing on. And he wants to worship. When he goes home to Damascus, he wants to build an altar and offer his sacrifices to no God but the Lord. And it seems to him that he cannot rightly worship the God of Israel while standing on the soil of a foreign country full of foreign gods. So he will take the land with him. He will carry the earth of Israel home on the backs of 2 mules and lay it down and stand on it, so that when he offers his sacrifices he will be in some small square of Damascus standing on holy ground. We may find the theology of it incomplete. We may know, as the story will one day teach, that the true God is not bound to any patch of dirt, that he fills heaven and earth, that no soil is holier than any other in his sight. Naaman does not know all that yet. He is a beginner. His faith is a day old. But listen to what the request actually reveals. It reveals a man so utterly persuaded, so completely turned, that he is already rearranging his entire life around this new allegiance, before he has even left the country. He is planning his worship for the years ahead. He is making arrangements for a lifetime of devotion to a God he met only this morning. There is nothing calculating in it, nothing performed. It is the raw, awkward, heartbreaking sincerity of a man who has been given something so real, he will freight it home on the backs of animals rather than leave any of it behind. Give me, he says, as much earth as a pair of mules can carry. For your servant will never again make burnt offerings and sacrifices to any other god but the Lord. Never again. The general goes home, and the story has shown us its deepest note, that the God who moved the mantle at the Jordan reaches clear across a national frontier, past the borders and the armies and the languages, and lays his healing hand on the proudest man of a hostile kingdom, and that the man goes home a worshipper. The outsider is brought in, the enemy is made clean. And it happened, in the end, not because Naaman was great, but because at the last he was willing to be small, to go down into a little river and dip himself under 7 times like a child at his washing. And it is precisely here, at the highest and most tender point of the whole cycle, that the story turns and shows us its darkest, because Naaman's procession does depart. The chariots turn north, the mules with their loads of Israelite earth fall into line, the whole caravan begins its journey back toward Damascus, carrying a healed general and his untouched treasure. And as it goes, another man watches it go, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the one who has walked at the prophet's side through all of it, who knew the Shunammite had no son, who ran ahead with the failed staff, who has stood in the room while the dead were raised and the poison drawn out of the pot. Gehazi sees the treasure riding away, and something in him cannot bear it. My master, he says to himself, was too easy on Naaman, this Aramean, by not accepting from him what he brought. As surely as the Lord lives, and hear how he takes the holy oath onto his lips, the very words his master swore when he refused the gift, twisted now into a vow of theft. I will run after him and get something from him. So Gehazi runs. He chases the departing procession down the road, and when Naaman sees him coming, he gets down from his chariot to meet him. This healed and grateful man, still full of the joy of his new life, climbing down to honour a runner from the prophet's house. "Is everything all right?" he asks. And Gehazi opens his mouth and begins to lie. "Everything is all right," he says. And then he builds the lie carefully, spinning a story out of nothing. "My master sent me to say, 2 young men from the company of the prophets have just come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 sets of clothing." He invents the guests. He invents the need. He invents the master's request. He drapes the whole theft in the authority of Elisha, using the prophet's name to pry loose the treasure the prophet himself refused. Every word of it is a lie, and it is spoken to the one man in the story who has just learned to tell the truth about God. And Naaman, generous, grateful, brand new in his faith, does not hesitate. "By all means," he says, "take 2 talents. He urges more upon Gehazi than was even asked, pressing the silver on him, tying up 2 talents in 2 bags with 2 sets of clothing, and giving them to 2 of his own servants to carry back ahead of Gehazi. The very generosity that would have honoured Elisha is now bent to feed a servant's greed. When they come to the hill, Gehazi takes the bags from the servant's hands and sends the men back on their way, and he hides the treasure in the house. He puts it away where no one can see it, and then he goes in and stands before his master as though nothing at all had happened. "Where have you been, Gehazi?" Elisha asks. "Your servant didn't go anywhere," he answers. 3 words of denial laid down over the silver hidden in the house. He did not go anywhere. He was here, faithful, at his master's side. And it is the second lie, and it is worse than the first, because the first was told to a foreigner on a road, and this one is told to the face of the man of God. And Elisha looks at him and speaks the words that end everything. "Was not my spirit with you," he says, "when the man got down from his chariot to meet you?" He was there, not in body, his body sat in Samaria, but the same gift that let him see the Shunammite's grief before she spoke it, the same sight that reached across 20 miles was with Gehazi on the road. Elisha saw the chariot stop. He saw the general climb down. He saw the lie form on his servant's lips and the silver tied into the bags and the treasure carried up to the hill and hidden in the house. There was never a moment of it he did not see. And then the terrible question, the question that names the sin as more than theft. "Is this the time," Elisha says, "to take money, or to accept clothes, olive groves and vineyards, flocks and herds, male and female slaves? Is this the time?" He sees not only what Gehazi has taken, but what Gehazi meant to become, a man of estates and orchards and servants, building a whole future on the back of another man's healing, turning the free grace of God into private wealth. In the very hour when God was showing a watching enemy that his mercy could not be bought, God's own servant ran down the road to sell it. The judgment comes, and it comes in a single sentence that binds itself across generations. "Naaman's leprosy," Elisha says, "will cling to you and to your descendants forever." The disease that left the Aramean in the river will not vanish from the world. It will pass over the border, run back up the road, and settle into the flesh of the man who chased the treasure. What Naaman carried away was 2 mule loads of holy earth. What Gehazi carried away, hidden in his house, was the disease itself waiting for him. And Gehazi turns to leave the prophet's presence, and as he goes, the text lets us see it happen. Leprous, it says, as white as snow. The whitening spreads across him even as he walks out the door, the visible mark of an invisible corruption, the outward sign of a heart that traded the truth for silver. The same 7-fold cleansing that made a foreign general's skin like a child's has its terrible mirror here. The insider, cast out, the healed disease, restored, only now to the one who deserved it least by his own choosing. It is the sharpest tension the cycle has yet given us, and we are meant to feel it as a blade. On one road, an enemy of Israel goes home clean, carrying earth for an altar, singing in his heart of the only God there is. On another road, a servant of the prophet goes out white with the very disease that enemy left behind. The foreigner was healed by humility. The insider was destroyed by greed. Nearness to the man of God saved no one. Gehazi walked beside Elisha for years, saw everything, and it did not make him clean. The Jordan saved Naaman, who had every reason to despise it, because he went down into it and did the small, humble thing. The proximity of holiness did nothing for Gehazi, because his heart was already on the treasure riding north. And having shown us that darkness, the theft, the lie, the whitening skin, the door closing behind a ruined man, The story does something that only a book this old and this wise would dare to do. It grows quiet. It does not stay in the place of judgment. It turns away from kings and generals and the great questions of grace and greed, and it goes down to the riverbank again, to a group of ordinary men doing ordinary work, and it tells us a small story about a lost tool. The company of the prophets, the sons of the prophets, the guild of men who gather around Elisha to learn and to live near the word of God, have outgrown their quarters. The place where they meet with him, they say, is too small for us. There is not room enough for all of them under one roof, and so they propose a plain practical solution, the kind of thing any growing community decides on a working morning. Let us go to the Jordan, they say, where each of us can get a pole, and let us build a place there for us to meet. Let us go and cut timber and put up a larger house. It is not a vision or a prophecy, it is a building project. It is men who need more space deciding to go and make it. And that small story of the lost tool has already been told, its axe head risen from the water at the touch of a thrown stick, its lesson quiet and complete. That the God of this cycle bends near to the small losses of ordinary men, and that nothing borrowed is beneath his care. So the river falls silent behind us. The timber is cut, the house is raised, the tool is recovered, and the camera of this old story lifts its gaze from the water and turns north again, to the borderlands, where the true danger to Israel has never stopped moving. Because while prophets built houses by the Jordan, kings made war along the frontier. The king of Aram, the same Damascus that had sent Naaman south and welcomed him home clean, was again at odds with Israel, and this time not in open battle, but in the quieter, deadlier business of ambush. He would gather his advisers and choose a place. In such and such a place, he would say, I will set up my camp. There he would lay his trap, meaning to catch the king of Israel unaware, to fall upon him where he did not expect it, to end the war with a single stroke in the dark. And every time, the trap closed on empty ground. For the man of God would send word to the king of Israel. Beware of passing that place, he would say, because the Arameans are going down there. And the king of Israel would check the place the man of God had told him about. Time and again Elisha warned the king, so that he was on his guard in such places. Not once, not twice. Again and again the word came ahead of the ambush, and the king moved his men, and the Aramean camp waited in the appointed place for an enemy who never came. Imagine the king of Aram in his tent studying the same maps, choosing the same kind of hidden ground, and watching every plan dissolve before it could be sprung. This enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, Will you not tell me which of us is on the side of the king of Israel? There was a traitor, he was certain of it. Someone in this room was carrying his secrets across the border. Someone at this table was selling him to Samaria. But one of his officers said, None of us, my lord the king. It is not one of us. It is Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel. He tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. The very words you speak in your bedroom. Not merely your marching orders, not merely your battle plans, but the words you say behind a closed door in the dark, to no one, in the privacy where a man believes he is alone. This is the reputation Elisha had earned by now. Nothing was hidden from him. He had seen Gehazi's heart from 20 miles away. He had seen a child's death and a widow's oil, and a foreign general's pride. And now, so the border army believed, he could hear a king whisper in his own bed, There is no wall thick enough. There is no distance far enough, the prophet knows. And so the king of Aram, hearing this, made a decision that only rage could explain. He would not adjust his tactics. He would not accept that he was outmatched by a power he could not see. He would go and capture the prophet. Go, find out where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. If the leak was one man, then the war could be won by seizing that one man. The report came back. He is in Dothan. Dothan. A small town a dozen miles north of Samaria, sitting on a low hill above a wide and fertile plain, on the great trade road where caravans had passed for 1,000 years. A place of shepherds and merchants and open country. There was Elisha, unguarded, unarmed, one man with one servant, no army around him, no wall of soldiers, nothing between him and the might of Damascus but the hill he slept on. So the king of Aram sent horses and chariots and a strong force there, and they went by night and surrounded the city. Picture the darkness of it. The people of Dothan asleep, the prophet asleep, the servant asleep, and out in the fields all around them, moving quietly in the dark, the horses of Damascus, chariots wheeling into position, spearmen taking their places on every side. A ring of iron closing around a hill in the night, patient, silent, waiting for the light. They did not attack in the dark. They did not need to. They only had to wait for morning, and then take the town at their leisure and find the one man they had come so far to seize. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. He steps out into the grey light before dawn, this servant, going about the ordinary business of the morning, perhaps to fetch water, perhaps only to breathe the cool air, and he looks up, and the whole world has changed overnight. The fields he knew are gone. In their place, ringing the hill on every side, is an army, horses stamping, chariots gleaming, men in their armour as far as he can see in every direction, a wall of steel wrapped around a town that has no wall of its own. "Oh no, my lord," the servant cried out. "What shall we do?" It is the most human sentence in the whole account. It is the sound of a man who has done the arithmetic and found only one answer. 2 of us, thousands of them. No way out, no hope. What shall we do? Meaning, there is nothing we can do. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. More than those with them. The servant hears this and surely does not understand it, cannot understand it, because he has just counted the enemy with his own eyes, and there is no larger number on their side of the hill. There are 2 of them. 2. And Elisha, unhurried, unfrightened, standing in the dawn beside a man who is shaking, does not argue and does not explain. He prays. And Elisha prayed, "O Lord, open his eyes so he may see." Not open his eyes to the danger. The servant already sees that all too clearly. Open his eyes to see what is truly there, to see the layer of reality that has been present all along, invisible, surrounding the army that surrounds the town. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. The hills full of them, not 2, not 100. The hills, every slope, every ridge, the whole high country around Dothan, filled with horses and chariots of fire. The same fire that had carried Elijah up into the whirlwind, the same burning cavalry of heaven, wheeling in ranks across the ground that only a moment before had looked empty. The Aramean army had surrounded the prophet, and the armies of heaven had surrounded the Aramean army. The ring of iron sat inside a greater ring of fire, and only now, with his eyes opened, could the servant see that the odds had been reversed from the very beginning. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. It was simply true. It had always been true. He had only lacked the eyes to see it. And here the story could have turned to slaughter. The fire could have fallen. The chariots of heaven could have burned the army of Damascus off the hillside where it stood. That is what fire does in these old books. That is what Elijah's fire had done. But this is Elisha's cycle, and Elisha's power runs in a different channel. He does not call down the fire. As the enemy came down toward him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, "Strike this army with blindness." And the Lord struck them with blindness, as Elisha had asked. The whole army, every horse's rider, every charioteer, every spearman in the ring, struck at once with a blindness that was not the loss of the eye, but the loss of the way. A confusion. A fog laid over the mind so that a man could still walk and still follow a voice, but could no longer find north from south, could no longer tell the road he stood on from the town he had come to take. And then the prophet walks out to them, alone, out of the town, down the hill into the middle of the blinded army of Damascus, one unarmed man walking calmly among thousands of soldiers who came in the night to seize him, and he speaks to them, and what he says is one of the strangest, wryest sentences in all the scriptures. "This is not the road," Elisha told them, "and this is not the city. Follow me, and I will lead you to the man you are looking for," and he led them to Samaria. Follow me, and I will lead you to the man you are looking for. He does not lie about who he is. He simply lets them keep believing the thing they already believe, that the prophet is somewhere else, in some other town, down some other road. This is not the road, and it is not the road to escape at least, and this is not the city, and it is not the city they meant to enter. He turns them south, this blind and stumbling column, and he walks at the head of it, and the entire military might that Damascus sent to capture one man now follows that one man in a docile line down the 20 miles of road to the capital of the kingdom they came to raid. Sit with the absurdity of it, because the story means for you to. Somewhere along that road, a shepherd looks up and sees a lone man in a prophet's cloak leading an army. An entire army, horses, chariots, the works, walking meekly behind him like sheep behind a herdsman. The hunters have become the herded. The trap has become the leash. The most feared force on the frontier is being walked into the enemy's stronghold by the very man it was sent to kill, and not one of them knows where they are. 20 miles of it. Half a day's walk. The dust rising, the chariots rolling, the whole grim column obedient to the voice at its front. And they come into Samaria. And the moment they are inside the walls, inside the city, inside the one place in all the land they should never have been able to reach, Elisha turns and prays again. After they entered the city, Elisha said, "Lord, open the eyes of these men so they can see." Then the Lord opened their eyes, and they looked, and there they were, inside Samaria. There they were, inside Samaria. The fog lifts, the blindness falls away, and every soldier of Damascus blinks and looks around, and sees stone walls on every side, and Israelite soldiers on those walls, and the gates shut behind them, and understands in a single sickening instant exactly where he is, and exactly how completely he has been undone. They came to trap the king of Israel. They are standing in his courtyard. They came to seize one prophet. They followed him into a cage. When the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elisha, "Shall I kill them, my father? Shall I kill them?" There is an eagerness in the question, and who could blame it? Here is the army that has been raiding his borders, whispering to trap him in the dark, delivered whole and helpless into his hands. Any king in the ancient world would answer his own question with the sword. "My father," the king calls Elisha, the same word Elisha cried when Elijah went up, my father," the title of deep respect, the acknowledgement that the real power in this room is not the crown but the prophet. "Do not kill them," Elisha answered. "Would you kill those you have captured with your own sword or bow? Set food and water before them so that they may eat and drink and then go back to their master. Set food and water before them, not the sword, not the dungeon, a table. Feed the men who came to destroy you and then let them go home." It is the same instinct that refused Naaman's silver, the refusal to treat the enemy as the enemy expects to be treated, the turning of the whole logic of war on its head. And the king obeys. So he prepared a great feast for them, and after they had finished eating and drinking, he sent them away, and they returned to their master. And the raiding parties, the text tells us plainly, stopped. So the bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory, not defeated by the sword, dissolved by a meal. The threat of war melted into a banquet, and the men who came in the night to kill went home in the daylight fed. It is a comedy and a mercy and a lesson all at once, and it is the high, strange peak of everything the prophet's power was ever for. But the peace that a feast can buy does not always last, and Aram did not stay away forever. The very next thing the old story tells us is that the mercy was not learned. Some time later, Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, mobilized his entire army and marched up and laid siege to Samaria, the same capital, the same king. But this time the Aramean does not come to trap or to raid. He comes to sit down outside the walls and to starve the city to death. And a siege is the slowest and cruelest of all the ancient wars. The army does not attack. It simply waits and closes the roads and lets hunger do the work that swords cannot. And the hunger inside Samaria grew until it passed every horror the mind can hold. There was a great famine in the city. The siege lasted so long that a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels of silver and a quarter of a cab of seed pods for 5 shekels. A donkey's head, the least and foulest scrap of the least clean animal, became a fortune. The refuse of the streets became food that only the rich could afford. And below even that, in the deepest pit of the famine, the story shows us something it does not flinch from, and neither can we. As the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him, "Help me, my lord the king." And when he asked what was wrong, she told him, "This woman said to me, 'Give up your son so we may eat him today, and tomorrow we'll eat my son.' So we cooked my son and ate him. The next day I said to her, 'Give up your son so we may eat him,' but she had hidden him. There is nothing to add to that. The story does not editorialize, and neither will this reading. It is the bottom of what siege can do to a people. Mothers making a bargain over their own children, and then one cheating the other of the debt. And the king, hearing it, tore his robes. And as he went along the wall, the people saw that under his robes he had sackcloth on his body. He had been in mourning all along, wearing the garment of grief beneath his royal clothes. But his grief turns instantly to rage, and his rage looks for a place to land, and it lands, as it so often does, on the prophet. He said, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if the head of Elisha son of Shaphat remains on his shoulders today." And he sends a man to do it. The famine is Elisha's fault, the king has decided. The prophet who warns of ambushes and heals foreign generals and does not lift a finger to break the siege. Take his head. Now Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. The king sent a messenger ahead, but before he arrived, Elisha said to the elders, "Don't you see how this murderer is sending someone to cut off my head? He sees the executioner coming, of course, as he has seen everything, and still he does not run. Look," he tells them, "when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold it shut against him. Is not the sound of his master's footsteps behind him?" The king is following his own executioner, changing his mind on the way. And while Elisha was still talking to them, the messenger came down to him. The king arrives behind his man, and his rage has curdled into despair, and he says, "This disaster is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer? Why should I keep hoping? If God has done this, then there is no help coming, and there is no reason left to wait." And into that despair, Elisha speaks a word so extravagant it can only be prophecy. "Hear the word of the Lord," Elisha said. "This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow, a seah of the finest flour will sell for a shekel and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria. By this time tomorrow, in a city where a donkey's head is worth a fortune, where mothers are eating their children, where the siege has held so long that hope itself has starved. By this time tomorrow, the finest flour will be cheap in the market and barley cheaper still, not next month, not when the siege lifts by some long campaign. Tomorrow." The officer on whose arm the king was leaning said to the man of God, "Look, even if the Lord should open the floodgates of the heavens, could this happen? It is the mockery of a practical man. Even if God tore open the sky and rained down grain, this could not happen in a day. The line is echoing Naaman's servants, echoing the king's own despair. The voice that has done the arithmetic and knows the answer, the voice that cannot see the hills full of fire." And Elisha answers him with the exactness that has run like a thread through this entire cycle. "You will see it with your own eyes," the prophet said, "but you will not eat any of it. You will see it. You will not eat it." The word is precise, and by now we have learned that Elisha's words are always precise, exact to the sneeze and the mule load and the healed inch of skin. Now, there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. Outside the wall, in the no man's land where the unclean were made to live, 4 men with the disease that Naaman lost and Gehazi gained. And they said to each other, "Why stay here until we die? If we say, 'We'll go into the city,' the famine is there, and we will die. And if we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, then we die." Men with nothing left to lose, doing the only arithmetic that offers any answer but death. And at dusk they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army, so that they said to one another, "Look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittite and Egyptian kings to attack us." So they got up and fled in the dusk, abandoning their tents and their horses and their donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives, the sound of a great host. The same illusion the prophet worked at Dothan, only inverted. There, an army made blind and led. Here, an empty night made to roar with the noise of an army that was not there. The besiegers of Samaria heard the chariots of a phantom rescue thundering in the dark and fled without ever seeing an enemy, leaving everything, running through the night toward the Jordan and dropping their gear as they ran. And the 4 lepers walk into an abandoned camp full of food and silver and gold and clothing, and they eat and they hide plunder, and then their consciences catch them. "We're not doing right," they said to one another. "This is a day of good news, and we're keeping it to ourselves." And they went and called out to the city gatekeepers and told them the news. The gate opens. The report races to the king, and when the king sends scouts and confirms it, the starving city pours out through its gate all at once toward the abandoned wealth of Damascus. So the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. Then a seah of the finest flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley sold for a shekel, as the Lord had said, word for word, to the measure and the coin. The prophecy of the impossible morning came true in the market of Samaria, exactly as it had been spoken the day before, and the king had put the officer on whose arm he leaned in charge of the gate. The mocking officer, the practical man who said even the floodgates of heaven could not do this, was posted to manage the very gate through which the deliverance now flooded, and the people trampled him in the gateway and he died, just as the man of God had foretold when the king went down to his house. He saw it with his own eyes. He did not eat any of it. He stood at the gate and watched the flour pour in, and the crowd surge over him, and the last thing his eyes took in was the fulfillment of the word he had laughed at, exact to the syllable, before the feet of his own people pressed the life out of him in the crush. Elisha's word is exact. It is always exact. It was exact for the widow and the Shunammite, for Naaman and for Gehazi, and it is exact here, at the peak and the crux of the whole long night's telling. The prophet's word lands every time precisely where it was spoken to land, and then the years pass as years do quietly off the page. The kings change, the wars go on, and the man whose word could stop an army and fill a market grows old, and the last thing the old book records of him is not another miracle, but a deathbed. Now Elisha had been suffering from the illness from which he died. He grows sick. The double portion he asked for at the Jordan, the spirit of Elijah that rested on him, the power that healed water and multiplied oil and raised a dead child and led a blinded army, all of it now inhabits a body that is dying like any other man's. And the king of Israel comes down to him and weeps over him, calling him by the very name Elisha once cried after Elijah. My father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel. The same words, the full circle. The one who received the mantle now receives the same farewell he once gave, and Elisha dies, and they bury him. That should be the end. Every story of a great man ends at the grave, and this one seems to as well. The prophet laid in a tomb, a cave cut into the rocky hillside sealed with a great stone, as the dead were laid to rest in that country. The power is spent, the prophet is gone, the cycle closes on a burial, as all lives close, but this cycle does not close on a burial, because Moabite raiders used to enter the country every spring. When the winter rains had passed and the roads dried and the season for raiding came around again, bands from Moab would cross the border to plunder, as they did every year. And it happened that once, while some Israelites were burying a man, carrying a corpse to its tomb, a funeral like any funeral, suddenly they saw a band of raiders. And in the panic to escape, with the Moabites coming on and no time to finish the rites, they threw the man's body into Elisha's tomb. They flung him in through the opening in the rock, this stranger, this dead man, into the place where the old prophet's bones lay, and they ran. When the body touched Elisha's bones, the man came to life and stood up on his feet. There is no prayer this time. There is no prophet lying mouth to mouth, no staff, no bowl of salt, no word spoken over the water. Elisha is dead. His body is bones in the dark of a sealed cave, and a dead man thrown carelessly against those bones stands up and lives. The power did not require Elisha's hands, or his voice, or his breath, or even his life. It had so saturated him that it outlasted him, that it lay in his very skeleton and reached out, unbidden, to raise a stranger no one had prayed for, in a tomb no one meant to open, on a day of fear and flight. And this is the key that unlocks everything the long night has shown us. Because we have watched all this while for the trick of it, for the prophet's technique, the secret in the salt, the power in the staff. And we were taught early at the Shunammite's door that the staff was nothing and the man was everything, that the power lived in the prophet and not the object. And now, at the very end, we are taught the last and deepest thing, that even the man was not the source. The bones had no gift of their own. Elisha was never the fountain. He was only the channel, a ploughman who followed a prophet across a river and asked for a double portion, and never once, in all the years of oil and axe heads and blinded armies, made the power his own. It flowed through him, and a thing that only flows through you cannot be buried with you, because it was never yours to keep. The overflow outran the vessel. The river did not stop at the grave. That is why the miracles were never performances. A performance ends when the performer dies. This did not end. It could not be exhausted by a lifetime or contained by a tomb, because it was the overflow of a God who does not run dry. The same God who healed the spring at Jericho and would not empty the widow's jar spilling out of a dead man's bones onto a corpse thrown against them by frightened hands. The prophet died, the power did not, and a stranger stood up in the dark alive on his feet, having touched the leftover fullness of a life that had only ever been a place for God to pass through. So we leave him there, not at his deathbed, and not in the crowded gate of Samaria, and not on the road at Dothan leading an army home to a feast, but in the quiet of a hillside tomb, where his bones lie in the dark, still working, still spilling over, long after the last breath left him. The ploughman who would not leave his master, the servant who asked for twice the fire, the channel that outlasted its own life. Rest now, and let the last picture be that one. A sealed cave on a spring morning, and inside it, a fullness that death could not empty, waiting quietly in the dark to raise whoever should fall against it.